Okay, I'm starting the recording. Okay, hi everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal. I'm a draftsman and your host for this podcast, A Conversation About Art. With these conversations, I'm doing long-term research on the meaning of art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today, I bring you episode 112 with artist Nicholas Coleman. If you enjoy this video, please like and share all the videos, and subscribe because these actions are very helpful. You can help even further by checking out the links in the description. So, Nicholas, welcome to A Conversation About Art. You are episode 112. Please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
Great. Yeah, my name is Nicholas Coleman. I've been painting and drawing and sculpting since I was just a little kid. My father was an artist who grew up in Provo, Utah, and he loved the American West. And just so when I was growing up also in Provo, Utah, I just kind of followed him around and it is to a studio, to the art shop, on Saturday mornings, and just kind of begged to do everything he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a lot of hunting and fishing growing up here in Provo, Utah, where we live in the foothills of the Wasatch Front. Uh, and so we have a lot of access to mountains and rivers and lakes, and there's just fantastic wildlife. I get deer wandering by my studio windows, which are right over here. And so just growing up with him, I kind of begged to paint on his paintings and would, monkey around on his sculptures that he was working on. And I think I got an apprenticeship without realizing that's what I was getting as I was growing up, priming boards, stretching canvases, getting things photographed, shipping things for him, getting things photographed. And it was just kind of, that was my life. And then as I got older and older and a teenager, I would, making mats for his watercolors that he would send off to the galleries in New York and in Santa Fe and different places. And then I went to school as well for art, although I think in the 90s it was tricky, in college and even in high school, trying to find the right kind of education. And this is before the internet got better, because it was kind of non-existent exactly, in the 90s. And then some of the old academies, the French academies in different places that I've read about in art books and you learn about in art history classes were gone. And then I think there's been a resurgence of kind of the traditional methods, which I wish I would have had, because I'm largely self-taught and taught under my father's in his studio, and he always joked that he was the worst kind of art teacher. But I just learning by example is kind of how I got my education, and then he just kind of gave me advice and practices, just looking closely at things. Don't draw what you think you see, but what where you're really looking at. And so for the longest time, I'm 45 years old now, and so I've been painting professionally for just over 20 years, and I think 20 years or so. It's still shocking to me how long this is all going. So, and the people keep letting me do this, and feel very fortunate, to paint what I love to paint, and then find enthusiastic people, like-minded people to kind of come along with me and support my efforts monetarily.
Yeah.
And so I can continue to paint and paint what I love. And it typically, revolves around the outdoors and wildlife and historical aspects of the American West. But I feel like I've gone around in a couple circles already, but that's kind of what I do artistically and in this field to continue to work on my art.
Okay. I think that your initial early education, that sounds really great. I recorded a couple of episodes yesterday, and I was kind of complaining or whining a little bit about how that apprenticeship basically doesn't, it doesn't, as far as I know, doesn't exist anymore. Like the way that you were describing it, that you have, it doesn't have to be your, one's family, right? It doesn't have to be a dad or something. But just like a teacher, a master artist to whom one is like an assistant type person almost, where the master teaches the apprentice how to do stuff, whether painting or preparing the work, and then sometimes even administrative work, like you were saying with your dad, and I guess Odd Nerdrum kind of does something of the sort in his school in the Netherlands. sort of. He has, supposedly you don't pay for that. If a person attends, supposedly you don't pay to go, but you kind of pay with labor. You model and this, prepare canvases and that type of stuff, which is, I guess, kind of. But I think that path of study via apprenticeship is really sorely missing. And the reason I was whining about it is because, if somebody lacks that in their life, then it is up to that person to basically figure it out all by themselves. And it's like, it's all of this wasted time in a way, because you're figuring it all out by yourself. And then it's like, oh, what do I want to draw? And it's like, what does it mean to draw well or paint well or sculpt well? You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, even though I don't know, what do you think about that? I mean, you feel very fortunate.
Oh yes. Yeah. For a lot of times, I think individuals. I get a lot of artists that will come to my studio or call me asking for advice on, how to approach their artistic careers and how to get into galleries and what do they do once they're in galleries, because a lot of times people think, oh, I've made it, I'm in a gallery, and that's just the first thing that might happen, really. And then you got to be like the nice squeaky wheel, helping the gallery make those sales, because a lot of times you're in there with 60 or 100 other artists
Right.
vying for wall space, but you might not realize that when you're brand new and just starting out. And sometimes that might be the right path, and sometimes that might not be the right path, for depending on what kind of artwork you're doing. And a lot of times, like I say, these apprenticeships. My dad always complained. He goes, "Oh, I wish you could study under, like there's a bird painter, Ray Harris Ching. He's like, oh, if I could send you to him, I would send you to him. He's was a draftsman. He's a technician. He says the only problem is at the time, in the 90s, as far as my dad knew, he smoked like a chimney. I'm kind of allergic to cigarette smoke, and I get migraines, different things. And he goes, that's the only problem. And I don't know if he lived in the UK or if he lived in New Zealand at the time. And so that was the other issue. I'm in Provo, Utah, and it was hard to send your teenage son out to a stranger,
Right.
really. And other than just appreciating and loving the artwork of another artist. I guess sometimes you might not know that's what you're lacking. And so a lot of people they go, well, how do I frame my work? How do I do this with my work? How do I, present myself? And sometimes they don't know, it's good to have, I know some artists that are fantastic at still lifes and at everything. And they don't want to miss any opportunities. So they present themselves as everything to
Right.
everybody. And individually they might be fantastic, but you would never know if that body of work is from one artist. Because it's here, 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 and here. And I've been to shows where I go, oh, this is great. And then I realize, oh, wait, this is all the same artist.
Yeah.
Because it's so all over the place. And so, like I say, sometimes, like I say, I give my advice and I always preface it with, it's my advice. My biases come in here. It could be completely different. And everyone's experiences are so different. And the older I get, the realize how little I know. And there's so many different ways to do certain things. And I do really, try to be helpful. And no matter what kind of genre or style they like to paint in, I always try to help them in that their direction as opposed to my direction.
Right.
Like I say, having my father was great, and it was very fortunate and to have him as a guide. But a lot of times, when it comes to art, when the lights goes out in the studio, there's no magic elves that come in at night to paint your paintings for you. I wish that were the case. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is the work really does rely on you. And as much as I would hope to rely on my father, getting older in my career too, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because I get associated with my dad, and even lately I'm getting less and less associated because my style is a little different. My subject matter is slightly different, although we definitely cross over on a lot of our interests. Sometimes people, like I say, it helps me get my foot in the door, but I have to keep my foot in there.
Sure.
And continue to push forward and produce the work myself. Otherwise, it's real easy to go, well, he's not doing anything. I'm not going to worry about that Coleman right now. But that hasn't. I'm a busy guy, so that hasn't really happened. So.
Okay. All right. So I'm curious about how you said that your subject matter is the American West. And I mean, I think that's cool. Obviously, that's fine. I've had a couple of other art. I had a gallerist, gallery curator, and at least one or two artists whose main subject matter is indeed the American West. So I'm curious about why you think that's um, worth depicting, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like I say, growing up in Provo, Utah, and I've mentioned this in a few like articles and different things. Like Provo, Utah, is named for a French fur trapper who came through this valley in the 1820s, and the Shoshone Indians captured him and a few other trappers, and I think two or three of them died, and he escaped, never to return. But when everything's a little more established, they named the town after him, and all the other subsequent towns up the Wasatch Front are named after mountain men. And just with growing up with my dad, him being who he was too, he loved, his dad was a railroad worker in Utah Valley, and there was no connection to artwork whatsoever, other than his own. Like I say, he had a little trap line where he would make extra money. I mean, it's his story is so funny.
Your
And he
grandfather's?
had nightmares of missing the opening day of fishing season, and he loved rabbit hunting and pheasant hunting, and his dad had no idea what to do with my dad. So it was his interests were so far different than his father's. He did, and then his mother was the one that encouraged.
Uh,
It's gone now. uh and
you were saying that his
and
mother
so
was the
his
one. You said
the,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, his mother encouraged him and bought him art supplies and different things, and he's told me stories of him standing up on top of his his house was very small. Pardon me. um and of painting the mountains that were in his backyard, and so when I was growing up with him, he would kind of, we had a pond and some rivers where we used to live, and so it was commonplace for fishing pole to be laying against the side of the house, and he would carve me fish gigs. Although I don't think I ever caught any fish with my spears. I tried real
Yeah.
hard. And then before school, we'd go check some our raccoon traps and different things, and typically empty most of the time. But it was just that kind of camping. And he would give me a lot of books to read, Life and Death on the Yellowstone and Grizzly Bear Attack storybooks, and so I loved, and then uh, just I loved animals, wildlife, and so the kind of the lure of the West with these old stories, and he'd point out places where certain things happened, where we'd live, and we'd travel to these places, and up into Wyoming and Montana and Idaho, and I was a Boy Scout as well, and we would go to certain scout camps up in Idaho, and black bears would come into our camps at night and steal all our food, and
Oh my god.
and so there's all kinds of funny reasons why. I mean, it just kind of where I lived and where I grew up. Because even when I started dating my wife, she goes, "Oh, I love seascapes. Why don't you paint seascapes?" And I said, "I don't live by an ocean. Cause I love William Turner and his paintings of the sea, and I mean they're amazing. And then he lived by the sea. And so part of my education, and then my father and both my parents love artwork, and so I got to visit a lot of museums, the National Museum in Washington D.C., where I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I got to see my first Winslow Homer painting, and it had a big impact on me. And so my dad was always pointing out, and his library is pretty fantastic. He'd always was handing me books, and so even behind me in my studio, I have piles of books, and I still love books, for education, and I don't think I'll ever tire of books or photographs and historical aspects. Like I say, that this day and age, too, people get upset about the history of the American West, and there is something to be said about the good history, the bad history,
Sure.
everything in between, and kind of so we don't forget it, because it came, it happened, and here we are, and what are we going to do with the history that we've learned? Are we going to make bad choices going forward? Are we going to make good choices? Hopefully, we're better for it
Sure.
now. And since seeing is how we can't turn back time and change the bad stuff, we might as well, while we're all here together, I think, try to make the best of what we can and make better choices, each and every day. And I think with artwork too, I love to portray the better moments in life, the things that we remember, the things that inspire us and move us. And I've had a funny friend from high school ask me, "Oh, how come you paint these fantastical sunsets?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, your skies are always crazy looking. They're bright pink, they're yellow, they're this, they're that." I go, "Have you never looked up at?" And we have some fantastic sunsets in Utah, especially because I live up in the foothills. We can look out across the valley, and we have a nice lake and another mountain range across the lake where we live, and it's fantastic. And we're out on horseback one night, and I said, "Hey, look up." And he goes, "Hey, it's one of your skies."
Yeah.
I said, "There you go." So,
yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Okay. Well, yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's similar to an apprenticeship in a way, because you're hanging out with your dad and your parents just in general, and they're kind of just teaching you basically why what happened, or not. What happened, and they're just telling you about where you are, things about where you are. And the reason for which I find that curious, and this is tangential because it's not related to my work, for example, or maybe it is, I don't know, is because so I'm from Panama, okay, and my dad was born in Bolivia and my mom was born in Panama and everything, but I never felt like this sense of pride for being born somewhere, in the same way that I have the impression that people here in the United States do. And it makes a lot of sense that if you're taught, even just casually, we did this and we did that, and this happened, and like what you were saying, then it makes a lot of sense that you would develop kind of like a connection growing up with the place where you were born and the place where you grew up. But that kind of stuff didn't happen necessarily when I was growing up. And it's not that we didn't go to historical sites or anything, we did, but I don't know. I don't really know. The thing is that even certain things like for example, here in the United States, people will listen to music in English because that's not the official language, but kind of official language in the United States. But when I grew up, I hardly ever listened to music in Spanish, because that is the official language in Panama. I always listened to music in English. And so when people listen to the music in the same language of their country, I'm like, why do you, I just think it's very interesting. And it makes a lot of sense when you explain it, that you would, if somebody is taught about these things, the good and the bad things, because at the end of the day, we're here in the present, and everyone is made of that history. Of all the good and bad things of the history, we're all made of it, because we are the result of that. It just seems very interesting. And then it also makes sense that because you also had, on top of that, the relationship of master and apprentice with your father, that then you would want to depict that, because you think it's cool, because I haven't been to Utah, but I can't, I've seen pictures here and there of the landscape, and it's that makes a lot of sense that you would want to depict that, especially if you have all of this connection with what you learned about it from your dad and your mom teaching you about it, and just the fact that it's amazing. I went to Sedona sometime last year, and it was amazing. It's no wonder you're painting that,
Definitely.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Okay, so you also mentioned that you draw, paint, and sculpt.
I try to. So,
But do you do all three of them kind of an equal amount, or do you have a main medium?
so typically I paint, and my main medium is oil painting. I think I started out watercoloring, or with gouache, kind of opaque watercolors, and then here and there I'll sculpt. And then the hard part about sculpting is I realize how much more time I need for sculpting. It's almost another full-time occupation for your brain and your hands. And at the same time, while you're sculpting, you realize it's hard to make sense of the time to spend on the sculpting when I don't have exactly an audience for it just yet. I've done a few smaller things and I've marketed them and sold them, but it's almost, like I say, it's almost a separate job to do that, even though it's all art related. And so I wish I need to spend more time sculpting, because it is pretty fun, and it's different. It helps. I think your brain needs to change up every now and then and
Sure.
try new things and expand, and it just helps with the monotony of, because every once in a while you get, well, I've thought about this while I've been painting sometimes. After 3 or 4 hours, your brain you kind of realize what you've been doing, and you realize, look at the clock and you realize how much time has passed, and you think to yourself, my goodness, what am I doing exactly? And then you obviously realize what you're doing is you're painting. And I'm always curious as to what compels me just to sit in my studio and get the work done that I do get done. But and I noticed when I was a kid as well too, like in high school, you have the distraction of friends and other activities, and I was always impressed by my dad, his work ethic, and that has stayed with me. And I served a church mission down in Brazil for a couple of years, and while on that mission, I learned. What was funny is my brain kind of clicked as how my dad sat there. It's you work, you sit down, like homework. All of us, when I got back into college, I'm like, oh yeah, homework isn't that big a deal. All these distractions, you realize how silly they are. And like, if you really care about something, you sit down and you get the work done. And then so that's kind of what I took. One of the takeaways that I learned while down in Brazil, and also seeing how my dad just gets his work done. I can say again, no one else is there to do your paintings for you. So if anyone's going to get them done, you have to get them done. And I remember having friends, making fun of me for blowing them off to stay home and work on my drawings and my paintings when I was a teenager and almost 20. And even at 21, both my parents sat me down and they said, "Are you sure this is where you want to go with your life? It's not as easy as it looks." And I thought,
Yeah.
this has never looked easy. I don't know why you guys are saying that. And they said, "Well, good, because if you're going to proceed, this is a lot harder than it looks." I go, I never thought it looked easy. And this day, it's I mean, it's definitely still a lot of work, and you got to juggle all kinds of things, in order to push forward and to continue to create and have ideas that are worth pursuing and have ideas worth people, hopefully buying from you, so you can continue to work.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Okay. Why do you think? Okay. So I was curious about. I mean, this might be better a little bit after when we start talking about what is art. So I'll try to remember that for when we get there. But why do you think that you're drawn more often to oil painting? Yeah, okay, yeah. Why do you think you're drawn most often to oil painting? Because I mean, that's the bulk of your use of the three mediums, right?
Yes, for sure. Somewhere along the way between watercolors and like I say, with water, I still love doing watercolors, but sometimes some of the surfaces I was painting on, and this is true of my father as well, because some of his gouaches are just tight, and like they're tight and they're loose where they need to be loose. And he looks at some of his old watercolors, he goes, "How did I do that?" And it's I look at it and go, "My goodness!" And he goes, his watercolor helped his oil painting. So I look at that. Certain things help other things. And I think earlier in my career, the illustration board that I used to paint on, they stopped making it. And for whatever reason, I couldn't find a surface that I liked. And then that same time, I was also working on oil paintings. And so there was a funny shift from doing more watercolors to oil paintings. And then as the more time you spend oil painting, I read a book, I think it's been out for a long time, that Malcolm Gladwell Outliers book. Although I didn't agree with his final thought on how the 10,000 hours worked into everything. But I do agree with like all the hours that go into something with brushes and the paint combinations that I use on my limited palette. I don't know if you call it getting into a groove or just not feeling comfortable, but it was if I could express what I wanted to go a little faster, maybe than the watercolors. But like again, nothing's fast or quick. So it's yeah, that's a good question.
So
And I
so
part of it is just I don't know if there's an enjoyment. There is an enjoyment, and as I look away, I'm looking at paintbrushes and I'm looking at piles of tubes of paints over that are out of the side of the camera. So, um, but I think that's kind of what it was. Is just kind of a natural transition between I couldn't find what I was looking for. I had everything else ready to go, the paints and the brushes, and my dad has a fantastic workroom. So I used to work in his studio. We had two easels set up, and he has a fantastic workroom in the basement that is pretty big, and that's where I used to make mats for him, and that's where I would prime boards and different things when I was a teenager, and so for my first few years before I built my own studio, that was just like a natural. We had that probably was very, like I say, very very fortunate in order to have all these materials that are all around me, and even when my wife and I moved into our first little condo, there was, I mean, a little teeny tiny room, and she got up mad at me once, like, why don't you paint here in our home? And why do you have to go to your dad's studio? And I kind of went, well, this is like, I can't even get my easel in here.
yeah.
And I said, and it's going to be a big mess. I said, painting is a big mess, and or it can be, and it kind of is at my house. I got paint all over my hands. I mean, there's paint all throughout my whole house of things that got touched and spread along the way. And But yeah, I think having the materials readily available was kind of the transition that took hold, and I went off from there. So I hope that answers that question. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, Mr. Coleman, what is art?
So I've had this conversation. Well, I've had conversations dancing around what is art, and I've quite a few artist friends, and we talk about this, and because there's a lot of things that I see out in the world that I don't like that are presented as art.
Right.
And I have my own opinions, and every once in a while I'll write some opinions, with Instagram posts or on I kind of have a blog that's terrible that I do every few months, kind of. But I think, I'll go back so when I was in college, I had a advanced watercolor technique professor who was very strange in that he didn't do any demonstrations, but he always loved having discussions on certain things. And he didn't like my opinion. Like, he tried to kick me out of his class a few times, and there were only 6 people in the class. And I kind of had to keep reminding him. I said, this isn't math. There isn't one way to do it. I said, art is subjective. And I said, some of these assignments, I really tried to get along. My mom asked me, she's like, if you can just graduate, I'll let you do whatever you want, but please try not to aggravate the professors. Because my dad had a reputation for antagonizing certain professors when he went to college, and so I was trying not to repeat that, and try to get as much education as I could out of each class, and I kept arguing to a minimum if I could, but he had ideas for other students about what they should be painting, and I disagreed with some of his opinions about what other students should be painting or where they wanted to do with their careers, and he had us write. Sorry, I'm like going off on a tangent to tell this little funny story. We had to do some kind of, I can't remember what the weird project was, but we had to write a paper to explain the project. And I wrote probably a sentence or two explaining what my thing was, because I thought my artwork was pretty self-explanatory. And he got upset, saying, well, you barely wrote anything. And I told him, I said, well, if you have to write a paper to express what you did with your artwork, I said, art is a communication tool. I said, so if you have failed, and like I said, this is a 21-year-old's idea of what art is at the time, but I still kind of agree with what my 21-year-old sort of thought about what art was even then. I said, if you have to write a whole paper to explain and express what you did with your artwork, I said, I think you failed to communicate what you're trying to do. I said, so your artwork might need a little more help, and your paper, I said, if anything, needs less. Right. When it comes to explain what you've done. And he didn't like that. And I had some other professors stood up for me and made sure he didn't fail me or kick me out because it was one of my very last classes before I graduated. And like I say, he was perfectly fine having these opinions, but I think I just assumed professors were there to help you. No matter what your end goal was with college, I assumed they were helping you in your trajectory to wherever you wanted to go. And for some reason, art was very strange, and they didn't want you going to certain places. And this guy was kind of like that. And I've joked, for better or worse, he made me focus on what I really wanted to do because he really wanted to not let me do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think for a long time I thought that was great, and I thought about it, I'm like, well, maybe I should have been a little more open-minded, but even then I still kind of come back to happy with the choices that I made artistically. But art, and I think I'm remembering, I can't remember the whole thing, but I think Edward Manet was criticized for his paintings being too uplifting, too happy, because real life wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of agreed. He goes, exactly. He goes, life is hard. There's plenty of painters painting miserable subjects, depicting real life. He goes, I choose not to focus on those things. So in my same path, I've tried to, and in art, I've tried to paint things that uplift myself, uplift others, and I think some of the best compliments I've gotten is not how that looks amazing or that looks like a photograph. I don't like that compliment, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's never been the goal, I don't think, and I don't think it should be. But people have said, "Hey, it feels like I've been there before. Like that looks like I feel like I've been there. Where is that?" And then it's not the same place most of the time. It's never been the same place. But that, I think, to me, that's one of the better compliments I've gotten is they kind of remember feeling a certain way in that amazing place, and that's kind of been my goal with artwork. And I guess it's hard to define exactly what art is because you got that banana thing that was duct taped to the wall, and which I still don't know what that was. And there's all kinds of funny.
It wasn't art.
It wasn't. I completely agree. It wasn't art. And there's so many. Like I say, my funny circle of artist friends and even acquaintances that I have, I think we all kind of agree. And there are certain ways, like especially with Instagram, some people have little side hustles, and they're projecting and blowing up big, certain things big, and it's impressive. But in my opinion, a lot of times it fails to be art because they've taken the searching, the struggle, the learning, they've taken that part out, and they jump straight to the finished product, and it's a product as opposed to art, but it's classified as art because it's big and it hangs on a wall. And I never want it to feel like that I'm jealous or sour grapes, but it can be obnoxious sometimes to because what's so funny now is even 20 years ago I wasn't up against, or most artists weren't up against that, I can call it strength competition, I guess. A lot of times you're like, oh, I won't ever worry about that, but then all of a sudden it creeps in, everything gets smushed together, and in the art world. And even my dad, when he was my age, there's even, you can almost half it down. There's probably a few hundred artists doing, Western art genre. And then when I joined it was probably 1,000 or two. And now it's tens of thousands, maybe, and everyone on Instagram is doing it better than I am. That's for sure. And there's a few certain things I refuse to do. I have my own funny rules. And I think the only person that's hurting is me. But I'll continue. I can't be a big person. I did a workshop once where they were very nice, and I was thrilled they actually asked me to do a painting workshop. But I'm terrible, like narrating what I'm doing, or I'm terrible like inviting people to. They had me say some funny things, and I said I can't say those, like welcome to me, and we're gonna sit. It's all these kind of cheesy catch lines, and we joked about it, and they were laughing. They go, oh well, it just sounds good and it's normal. And I'm like, I can't do it. And anyway, what's the next question?
No, I completely agree with you, with your muse about the subject and about the question. And it usually makes me sad when there's a story about a teacher who doesn't like being challenged by a student, especially when it's like that's what you want. I mean, if you're a good teacher, it's like that's what you want because you obviously don't know everything, and it's like I mean, the whole point, especially in college and university and stuff, is for everybody to kind of try to think for themselves and all of this stuff. You know, it's like that is ideally the whole purpose of the thing. But and this part is something like what you were saying about the paragraph, the essay to accompany the work. That's something that I have for sure thought for also like I mean I definitely thought that as well for a long time. I was like, it doesn't make sense. It's like if the work of art or the alleged work of art requires an entire plaque, the plaques that they put in the museum or MoMA or whatever to explain the work of art so that you get it, quote unquote, then that work is flawed. Because and so like more recently, a guest that I had on the podcast, his name is Robert Florzak. He put it so he said the same thing, but in a way that is I think kind of polishes the same idea, and it's that so you and I, what we do is visual art, because you make paintings and I make drawings. So the point of the work is for you to look at it with your eyeballs. Okay, so then the work has to be able to kind of like demand your attention in a way and keep your attention, the attention of the viewer in a way, via the eyeballs. It's like you should not need an explanation about circumstances, about the artist, about how the artist made the work, about why they made the work, about what the meaning of the work is, what did the artist mean, what did the artist... You do not need an explanation. You should not need an explanation of any kind in order to be able to enjoy the work of art. And what carries the work is the visual quality of it, meaning like, composition and tone, contrast, whatever, like all of this stuff, like accurate representation, like all of these things. It's like that is what carries the work, and that is what kind of asks sort of the viewer to spend time with the work, contemplating it. And if the work is not capable of doing that, then it's not a good work of art, or it is not art. Similarly to when you have music, so you have oral, of the auditive system, it's like that is the reason for which one can enjoy Japanese music without understanding the language. Because if the song is good, then it doesn't matter what the lyrics say. You know what I'm saying? So then it's like when you're looking at something, it's like you don't have to understand what is art or anything about the work. If the work is well made visually, that is all you need,
Yes.
because it's for your eyeballs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, So having said that, and also having, having mentioned that there are some things that want to usurp the name of art, but they are not art. So I'm curious about the reason for which you used the phrase that art is subjective at some point when you were talking a little while ago, because I feel as though that is in contrast, because some things obviously are not art.
Sure. Well, what I meant, I think at the moment when I said it to this particular professor is I even tried to explain it to him, and I failed explaining it to him because he wasn't in the mood. Is I said it's not like math. I said math. There are rules, and there's only one way to do math. I think that was the example I gave him.
Right.
I said 2 + 2 is 4. There's no way around it. That's the way it is. And I think when I said art is subjective, I said there's more than one way to approach. That's kind of all I meant is there's more. There are certain things you can do differently and still get to a final product, and you can arrive at there different directions. I think that's all I meant by
Okay. So
the subjective.
Okay, so
I guess a relative, maybe a relative should be a better word than subjective. So.
But I mean, are you talking more about like the process of making a painting, for example, like?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, I am, because he gave us some parameters, like I want you to do this thing. Like this particular professor had all kinds of I didn't have this much trouble with anybody else at the college other than this guy. and like we'd critique things on the floor. And a couple of times I said, and they were like, I tried my best to get along, but I said, he would ask my opinion and I would give it sometimes. And I said, listen, I said, this assignment deserves to be critiqued on the floor. I said, this was a dumb assignment. I said, you asked us for this, and this.
Yeah.
You did no examples. You didn't show us any examples. And I said, you expected us to guess what we were supposed to do. And I said, this is good. This is great. I said, I don't know what because he wanted everyone to redo the assignment. I was arguing about not having to do it again because I thought it was a waste of time. And I was at the moment too, like I say, it was I think my senior year. I was working in my dad's studio, and then I'd have to break away from working to go down to school, and it was like a 4-hour block class that was it was supposed to be 5 days a week. He took Fridays off at some point, which some students were thrilled with. And I'm like, hey, I'm paying for this. What do you mean you're taking the 5th day off? You're getting paid still for that 5th day of a 4-hour block class a day. And then he also didn't want anyone to be late, but then he would show up 40 minutes to an hour late most days. That drove me insane.
Right.
And so I already had a chip on my shoulder
Yeah.
with his attitude. And then he would just say, like, there was a 35-year-old woman who had come back. She was a high school art teacher, came back to get more education so she could go back and teach her students better. And, at the very beginning, he asked, what kind of paintings do you like to paint? She said, I love landscapes. And he goes, oh, by the time we're done with this class, I don't want you painting landscapes anymore. She goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, oh, there's too many landscape painters out there. I want you painting parking lots. And she goes, parking lots, like to learn and to grow? Or he's like, no, none of that stuff. There's nobody painting parking lots. So it'd be great if there was someone finally painting parking lots. And I said, whoa. Like sometimes I couldn't take it. And I think it was even, I'm probably telling a better version of this story, but I said, you can't tell this woman to paint parking lots.
Right.
I said, nobody wants to. I said, there's no reason to paint a parking lot. I said, it's a parking lot. Why would you do this to anybody? And why would you tell them, and then you tell it's not even to learn and to grow. I said, that would be the only reason, by the way, for anyone to paint a parking lot is you're trying to get them to look at something differently. I said, this sounds stupid. And I slightly hot-headed, like I have my opinions still, but I'm a little nicer I'm a little more open. I try to be open-minded, and I try to be nicer and understand as much as I can before I jump in with something that might not make me a friend at the end of the day. So.
Okay. I mean, that teacher just sounds a little not teachery, And it's like also, it's like if he thinks parking lots are so great, why doesn't he paint them then? It's like, why don't you do it then? Anyway. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Coleman, what is beauty?
Beauty. I think it can be something that uplifts. I think would be my kind of what I'm. When I think about what beauty actually is, something that uplifts, inspires, gets you, makes your mind do something like wake up a little bit and perk up, and I guess what's the older I get, I realize how much less I really do understand or know about the physical world and different things, but there are some, I think, eternal truths. And beauty, I think, is one of them. And I'll make one more story about this professor. We had to do an assignment, and he wanted it. This is the strangest way. Like he was kind of doing something against beauty. He wanted something. What was? How do you explain it? He wanted it. Nothing. He wanted it to be against nature. It was almost like. Funny to say, removing God out of the equation. I want it independently beautiful of nature. And I kind of went, what? And he was trying to back out. And I depending on where anyone's beliefs are with God or how you feel about God. And, but part of me at that time, and even now, I mean, I don't know how you can exactly remove yourself out of the universe to find something to be beautiful. I mean, and his examples were very black and dark and just they're ugly, not inspiring. Well, I'll get I'll make that point. Not inspiring, nothing to get you excited. Like, oh boy, I can't wait to start another one of these. And except I can't remember. And I think someone even tried to say, oh, I'll zoom in on a tree trunk, and he goes, no, no, no. That's beautiful still. And even in his eyes, I mean, he knew the truth, but he was trying. I don't like I say. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to think outside the box, and as a thought process, a thought experiment or assignment. But then when you question him on it, it never ended up being, wasn't thoughtful. That drove me nuts. And then, so back to what is beauty? I think to me it's something that is beautiful, and then there are certain elements I think that depending on what kind of artist you are or who you are, there are, like I say, certain elements you try to bring together to present kind of your vision of what you believe is beautiful to the rest of the world. And I think some artists are very successful in communicating that, and I think that's great. And I know I could communicate better. And like I said, I think the one hang up I think that probably a lot of artists have, and people in general, is communication. Because there's so many ways to get it out, with Instagram or Facebook, and sometimes they're helpful, sometimes it's not helpful. And sometimes people probably, don't do themselves huge favors in the way they communicate, even though their artwork might be fantastic. And so I wish that was the only barrier removed, is how we're able to communicate our vision, that we, when we're creating artwork. Because sometimes I think part of it is, the reason I continue to paint is I feel compelled to continue to paint and to paint things. And a lot of times most of the time I have no idea where it's going to go. I get an idea, or I look through my sketches that I've had, and I go and I see something that's like a pattern or a certain way of light hits something that gets me excited to kind of try to recreate and create myself, my version of that thing that I saw that got me excited and that I want to share, and hopefully find someone out there that likes it too.
Okay. Okay, so this is the other thing I wanted to ask you, and you used the phrase again, which is compels me. So what? Okay, so then I just looked up the meaning of the word according to what is this? Wordnik. I don't know what that is, but anyway, it says to make one yield or submit. So it says. Dictionary.com says to force or drive, especially to a course of action. Merriam-Webster says the meaning of compel is to drive or urge forcefully or irresistibly. So I like this one.
Yeah.
Urge forcefully, urge irresistibly. So I like that definition of the term compel in particular. So, since we're talking about beauty in particular, I mean, do you think what does compel you, and is that related to the experience of beauty, to what you're talking about, that beauty is something that makes you feel, that makes the viewer, or and maybe in your case, like the artist who's making the work, makes you feel something positive, uplifting, or yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah. Think. Hearing the definition, it strikes me as it's exactly. I think some of it comes down to the human experience, I think, and what it might mean to live a joyful life, and and living a grateful life. And like I said, I do feel like I've been able to experience so many things. I do want to share what brings me joy, and it's funny to show. It might not be funny to show animals and wildlife, but these things, make me happy. When I was a little kid watching the National Geographic show with my parents and my family, these funny little things, made me happy. And when we've rescued some deer and antelope over the years and nursed them, as babies back to health. And we've had hawks and falcons and owls that we've rehabilitated. And there's just something about Mother Nature and something about the details and the design in everything, that makes me excited to share what I do. What's been a bit interesting too is I'm kind of a hermit. You can see my beard, and I typically I'm in my studio most days working, and when I do get out, it's to go, get photographs and get inspiration to bring and drag back to my studio, to get back to work. And well, I lost my train of thought a little bit there. Oh, uh, what's been fantastic about what my artwork has done for me and in communicating is I've met some wonderful, wonderful people over the years, that I've made friends with, that are all across the world. You found me, and I've met some fantastic people that have invited me into shows in France and up into Sweden and Belgium and Spain and even to Japan. And so it's opened up doors that I never knew were even there, artistically, with my work, that I have lifelong friends now, that I might be better friends with these people that live thousands of miles away from me than I, that live out my door just a few doors down.
Right.
And so I think, like I say, part of it, like that compelling part of my work has drawn me to the more meaningful relationships I've had with my work. And even my mother-in-law. So my wife is half German. Her mother is German. And when I was in high school, I remember I've known my wife since we were in preschool together, actually.
Okay.
And her mother's father had a fantastic art collection, and I went to some parties as teenagers to her house, and I was always looking at the paintings and different things. And then in high school and even in college, I would go to the art museum, and her mother was a docent at the museum. And then I didn't actually run into my wife until my very last class. It was a history of interior design class that I ran into her, and I even had a crush on her. We were in high school art classes together, and one thing that ruined it is I was helping her out with a project, and she goes, "Oh, you're so helpful. You're like having a little brother."
Oh,
and
no.
So I had to move a few spaces down because that did it for me. I was like, "Well, I'm not a little brother." But I was glad I ran into her again in college, in this history of interior design class, which I accidentally signed up for, but I was too lazy to transfer out of, because transferring out of a college class was just a nightmare at the time for me. But then we got to talking, but what was funny is I ran into her mother quite a few times, and her mother always stopped to talk to me and would tell me what her daughter was up to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that little bit of just our mutual appreciation of artwork, I think, helped us kind of reconnect again. And her mother still has a fantastic art collection, which I was looking at just a couple of days ago when we went and had dinner there the other night.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of Northern German people, and I think a lot of German artists don't get the credit they deserve. It's one of those unlooked at periods in art, but it goes back to beauty and, like I say, and joy and the human experience, and I think it can do more than what people think. Oh, sorry, one more tangent I was thinking of. We were in Amsterdam, and I wasn't a huge fan of Van Gogh or Gough, however you want to pronounce it, but then seeing the museum there, and even I loved the Rijksmuseum, and but just kind of seeing what art can do, and certainly this is where I kind of made the realization, was in Amsterdam. And I mean, even Rembrandt's house is there. I've been there a couple of times, and what's funny is how time marches on, and from hundreds of years ago, no one remembers the politicians exactly. No one remembers the bank people with their names on the walls. But what people do remember is, well, at least in my world, I guess, is the artists that came and left their mark, and have left a piece of their spirit behind for other people to enjoy, to inspire. And that got me to appreciate Van Gogh's works a little bit more, because his early stuff looked awful, and he continued at it, and then then he learned who he tried to hang out with, and he really did try to fit in with the Impressionists and be buddies, and had an interesting life trying to do that. And thank goodness his brother and his sister-in-law made sure his stuff stuck around, and then everyone else gets to enjoy it. And I still remember there's a list. I remember looking at the wall of names, and no one's looking at the wall of names of the benefactors who made that museum possible, but who really made it possible was that artist, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of a lot of artists that have come before, and especially the good ones and the thoughtful ones, is they've left a little bit of their spirit behind to inspire, and I think that's exactly what it is meant to do and does.
Okay. Yes. So. Okay. Well, I mean, I like that a lot, and I agree about Van Gogh, and how he really put in a lot of work because he wanted to be better at at his paintings and his drawings. And I don't know about you, but I really like his drawings. When an artist makes drawings and paintings, I tend to favor the drawings, and his drawings are really, really amazing. So, in terms of what you were saying about beauty being, this is going to be the last question, regarding the subject, being something that you think should uplift the viewer and the artist as well, hopefully. What do you think about, and I'm going to specifically ask the question about work pre First World War, because we know that's when shit got ridiculous. But pre First World War, when skill in study and in art was still appreciated and is expected and even demanded, arguably ugly things were still depicted. Like, for example, I saw, not in person, but I learned recently of a series of prints by Hogarth. They were called like the 4 stages of cruelty, and the first one depicts a couple of guys that are holding a dog, and they're shoving arrows into the dog's butt, and I was like, that's terrible. I don't remember what century that's from, but it's like I said, it's like pre 1800, it's like 1700 or something, I don't know. But so it's old, and I mean, they're well made, the prints are well made and everything. But what do you think? I mean, do you think that the intention of beauty is just removed from that kind of work? And if so, then what purpose do you think that kind of work could have?
I think there are always going to be certain people with a mentality to, be counter to whatever the movement is. I mean, you had the Impressionists getting rid of, the traditionalists, like Thomas Moran and Bierstadt. At the end of their careers, they couldn't give away their paintings. And American Impressionists kind of took that away against counter the establishment, or whatever they deemed was the establishment at the time, and which seems crazy to me. I mean, and my dad and I talk about this quite a bit, and about we come to the conclusion not to worry about what anyone else is doing, as long as we are doing our best to make our paintings with care and as high as quality as possible. We that's all we can do, and we can and while we're alive, we can always paint another painting. And I think, like I say, there's always going to be somebody, and there's sometimes you watch movies and they cast someone that's meant to be the jerk, or
right,
the whiny person, and you're not supposed to like that person, and you think, well, the casting, if you understand film, sometimes you understand the casting director did a fantastic job, because that guy, nobody likes that guy. And I think there are certain just personalities in history that maybe it was known that they were a weird guy or a jerk or something, but I part of me just thinks that they did it counter just because, not because I thought they were more talented and they were having a hard time, but sometimes, and I still I hear stories of people that are acquaintances or people that I meet, and they tell me what they've done, and I go, I think, to myself, why waste the time
Yeah.
in doing that? And I was in Spain once with my wife, and we were at the Prado. I pronounced that wrong. Uh, Museum, and we saw, or no, it was, well, we saw the Prado. Oh my gosh, my American accent is driving. I can hear it sounding wrong. But I think there was a modern museum with the Guernica, uh,
Okay.
Picasso's Guernica, and I'd
Yeah.
seen it in history books, and it's about this big in a book. But actually, to me, and in person, it was fairly impressive. Like, okay, now that actually is impressive because it's like 10 by 30 feet or something
Okay.
huge, and a whole room in it. But the rest of the museum, there was so much, so many things devoid, I want to say, of beauty. Within about an hour, I had one of the worst migraines my brain has ever had. Like, I know certain things excite my brain, make it happy. Like, I try to be drawn to those things and look at these things. But we happened to be in Spain. I think we just visited Sorolla's museum, which was fantastic and very inspirational. My goodness. And then seeing this modern part of this museum. I mean, even the architecture was kind of brutalist, and it was cold, heartless, soulless, dark depictions of all kinds of things. And even for the longest time, like even Goya's paintings of Saturn eating the babies, and I actually just read somewhere that Goya didn't want anyone to see those particular paintings. He wanted to be known for his other work. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, now I actually like Goya a little better because he didn't really, he had a dark side, but he was able to paint what he did paint. But those shocking dark paintings are the ones they show in our history classes and are the ones that people see. And
Right.
those are the ones that I had seen growing up. And so I just kind of, you can appreciate it for the art history aspect of it, but I kind of generally stayed away from that kind of stuff. And but then again, learning that he didn't want people to see those, I'm like, okay, I respect him a little bit more for what he was trying to do. Anyway, um, but yeah, I think there's provocateurs out there, and what's crazy, like this day and age, I mean, you want to say you want the good, there needs to be bad stuff so you can appreciate the really good stuff.
Okay.
So you have that spectrum, I guess, because then the really good things really do shine out. And if we're always seeking out those things, I think typically we'll be a little happier as human beings, and be able to appreciate what the artist was trying to share, I think.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, um, Mr. Coleman, we've broken the hour-long mark of our conversation here, so I'm going to start to close it out. I
Okay.
also like these final things, like your reply to the last question, as kind of like the closing thoughts for the podcast. So, is there anything you want to add? Where can people find your work? Do you have any projects that you're excited about coming up, or anything?
So yeah, so I my paintings. I've been trying to update my website, nicholascolemanart.com, a little more regularly, and I do sell a few things from there every now and then. But then from my website, there are links to my galleries, who've been great at supporting me over the years, and I try to support them. And then I was just down in Texas, in San Antonio, at the Briscoe Western Museum for their Night of Artists show, and there's some wonderfully talented people and artists at that show as well. And then the next show I think that's coming up might be at the Maxwell Alexander Gallery in L.A. I think they're having like a summer small work show, and then there's another smaller group show as well. And then there is at the Kaus Sharp Foundation in Taos, New Mexico. It's a gala event and fundraiser for the Taos Society of Artists, who lived down in Taos in the 20s and 30s. And the Kaus, Anger Irving Kaus's museum was one of the best kept historic. Like they have his photographs, his studio, his old easel setup, and a few of his examples of his paintings. And they have some of his beadwork and his pottery. But they have a fantastic director, Davison Koenig. I think that's his last name, who gives fantastic tours if you're ever down in Taos, New Mexico. But there'll be a fantastic list of artists at that show as well coming up in June.
Okay.
And then going into the summer and fall, there's some, I think, some gallery things happening. And then there's the Wildlife Museum in Jackson Hole's, I think it's called what is it called? Well, it's a wildlife show at the Wildlife Museum in Jackson Hole. And then I think probably some shows in the fall as well. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what's happening.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Nice work staying busy and showing a lot. That's awesome.
But the trick is keeping with the deadlines because I'm notoriously bad at making those deadlines. I think most artists are, so I think we're all in the same boat there. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, so, well, thank you, Nicholas, for talking with me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to support Nicholas and my podcast, you can do so through the links in the video description, so please check those out. So I will see everyone in the next episode. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you so much. See ya.